welcome back to the Perspective with Viv podcast. My name is Viv and welcome to the show. Today's title is Thoughts Are Not Gods with Betsy Holmberg. What if the loudest voice in your head wasn't the wisest? Today, we talk about breaking the spell of thoughts we worship without question, and we'll be having this conversation with her. Betsy Holmberg is an award-winning psychologist and author specializing in overthinking and negative self-talk. She writes for Psychology Today. I love that publication, by the way, and has been featured in radio, television, and podcasts. Her first book, Unkind Mind, comes out on June 1st by New Harbinger Publications. Congratulations.
Well,
Before
thank you.
settling into writing, you're welcome. Before settling into writing and therapy, Betsy ran the global behavioral health service line at McKinsey & Company, a premier consulting firm. She also worked at Harvard and co-authored several peer-reviewed academic journal articles on non-suicidal self-injury and suicidal thoughts. She's trained in cognitive behavioral and dialectical behavioral therapies and has treated clients of various ages and presentations. Betsy received her doctorate, master's and BA in psychology from Duke University. Wow. So many things. First of all,
So many degrees.
thank you. So many degrees, so many, what's the right word? Achievements. Everything you're doing is something that I find very interesting. So I'm very happy we're having this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Well, I think you are absolutely amazing. So I'm totally honored to be here. This is so fun.
Thank you. Let's dive into the questions. So I would love to begin with your personal story. What was that turning point moment that led you from deep depression to researching the brain's thought patterns in such a radically new way?
Oh gosh. So I had a very challenging divorce. My husband left me when my baby was only 15 months old. He was just starting to walk and he's like, I can't do this anymore. And so the whole process of going through family court, I found very, very hard. And it's just starting to come out in the world now, really bad that is for mothers and how bad that is for our mental health and and how we're perceived in the family court system, which is wonderful and fascinating. And that work needs to be out there in a bigger way. But I got really low and my parents actually came and stayed with me and I went on an antidepressant and we got through and I was still like building my life. And it's 3 years later and I'm still on my antidepressant and I'm like, okay, you have enough distance now. Like you should be healed and it should be done. And so I kept trying to titrate down. And every time I did, my negative self-talk went crazy. And it was all like, you're not giving your son what he needs. You know, I wanted him to have a family and siblings. And I just felt worthless for that reason, worthless for choosing someone who would leave me. I was so obsessed with how other people would perceive me in the world. Like, would other moms want to be my friends? I'm this weird mom now, you know, that's divorced with a baby. So I was so depressed with that. And I am a therapist. And so I know exactly what that would be. I thought that's not going to help. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to be broken like this for the rest of my life, at least let me find out how I'm broken. And so I went into the literature to try to see like, where is this coming from and why am I doing this? And it was a total crazy aha for me. And once I got what the joke was, if you will, I was able to let all those thoughts go. And I finally felt healed for the first time in a very long time. So I'm a real introvert at heart. I just want to be reading. So the idea of actually going out there and sharing this is a bit wild, but it's that important to me because I think this can produce a lot of healing in the world.
So true. I totally agree. And thank you for sharing your story with us. It's so profound for you to be here where it's like you're using your voice, you're being yourself, you're stepping out of who you were before, that shell of who you were. And I'm pretty sure moms want to be your friends and your child is actually so blessed to have you. I'm pretty sure about that.
Well, you know what?
So
I
this-
have made a lot of good friends and my son is doing great. So that all has gotten a lot better. But this is exactly what you were talking about in the beginning was these thoughts aren't real and they don't help us at all. And if anything, they paint the bleakest picture of the world and the most critical picture of ourselves and what we have to offer the world. And so, I'm on a mission to get us to all stop listening to that voice.
So true. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, as a psychologist yourself, what was it like to realize that traditional therapy might not give you the answers you were seeking?
Oh, so depressing. I think many of us have had situations where we've gotten in with therapy and it just isn't fitting and it isn't working. And there are some incredible therapists out there that are doing incredibly healing work. Like, that's nothing to take away anything from there. But it's a very broad industry, and there are a lot of different people out there doing a lot of different things. And sometimes that stuff isn't the most helpful. And so it was sad to think like my industry can't help, but at the same time I thought, well, if anyone would get that, it would be me, because I've seen both sides of it. I've done therapy and I've been a client. And so, you know, sometimes we don't need to just talk about our problems and talk about where we come from. Sometimes we need a better understanding of who we are to be able to manage what we're experiencing. So like I'll give you the science right now, because I bet everyone's like, well, what was your aha? Like, what was it? And so in a nutshell, what it is that our negative thoughts come from a network in the brain that, based on where it's located and how other species have it, et cetera, there's a lot of science behind it, but it is primitive and it's automatic. It just runs. And what this thing does is it helps us identify the norms and expectations around us and tries to get us to fit into them. And this was incredible for our evolution in hunter gatherer days when we were in clans of 150 people, because we could just fit into that clan and get a solid role and we would feel safe. And this system is still trying to find safety, but it's designed for a clan of 150 people. And now we interact with hundreds of people, like sometimes in a week, you know? And so it will constantly beat us up and tell us we're not good enough and we're not doing enough. It will compare us to everyone else around us, being like, well, aren't they more successful and aren't they prettier and aren't they this? And it is automatic. So this is not us. This is not how we feel. Like, I'm not insecure. I'm not, worried about whatever it is. I'm listening to it. And so when we can separate from these thoughts, then it opens up a world where we can be more authentic, where we can be happier. I mean, it just kind of opens up a whole new path for us.
I really love your answer. Thank you so much for that answer that you gave. That was very broad, but also very realistic, because a lot of times people really do worship their thoughts. They really do think that because I'm thinking that, I'm that. And I love that you said that I'm not insecure. I'm not insecure, but I may have insecure thoughts. And those thoughts are not mine. They're a primitive mindset. So I'm just observing it. I'm not listening to it and taking it in. That's what you explained. And I really like that, because as we dive deeper into the questions, I'm sure more things will come up, because we are not our thoughts is a very important thing to realize. We're just the observer of our thoughts. But a lot of times we find people running with that narrative that they think in their mind. And just having this conversation alone is groundbreaking. Yeah, just like I said in the beginning. So let me dive into the third question. You talk about the default mode network, this primitive brain system that drives critical, fearful thoughts. Can you break that down for listeners in plain terms? What's actually going on in the brain?
Oh, great question. So, what's happening is, let's step out a bit from the default mode. So, we actually have two thought networks. So, as humans continue to evolve, we had this exponential brain growth and we developed an even more sophisticated network that are the thoughts we choose to have. So, when we focus on something, when we meditate, when we do like anything that we are choosing to do it, we use this central executive network. And so we either are using our central executive network and choosing our thoughts, or we're listening to the default mode network. So if you're like going throughout your day and it's just this running inner monologue, or you're with a group of people and you're kind of paying attention, but like not really paying attention because you're more focused on, oh, I have to do this afterwards and that, and like da 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 or da da da, your DMN is running. And so anytime when you're not fully present, your DMN is running. And when we can start to recognize what this thing is, we don't have to just listen to it. I feel like without knowing what it is, we just kind of are like, this is the experience of being human. This is me. I'm listening to myself narrate my world. And that is 100% not the case.
Wow, that is so, so shocking. So many people believe their thoughts are who they are. How do you begin to separate your identity from that internal monologue?
Oh, such a good question. So I started by kind of anthropomorphizing my DMN. So what I did was I pretended, so you could give it a name, you can give an image of it. Like you can just call it your DMN if you wanted to. But for me, what worked for me was thinking, all right, I'm the CEO of myself and I have these incredible senses that are great people working for me, like my hearing and my sight and my taste buds. But then I have this obnoxious employee that sits in my office and just talks to me about office drama and how everyone's taking credit for its work and blah, blah, blah. And it's up to me to send it back to its cubicle and shut the door. And so any like metaphor we can use to see like, oh, that's our DMN can help first of all not believe it, and then second of all separate from it. And then if you are starting to think like, so wait, that's my DMN, what is it talking about, how would that have helped in the hunter gatherer days, any of that like conscious thought process is putting you in your CEN. So some people do it that way. Other people do it where they get into their body. So you can focus on how's my breath? What does my heart feel like? You can focus on how the world looks around you. What does the wind feel like? Like any of these things that get you into the present moment will turn off your DMN.
Thank you so much. That was so, so helpful. Now, in your research, what was the most surprising or liberating truth you discovered about our thoughts?
I think the most surprising and interesting one for me was that this is the nutshell of what meditation does. Because I've always held meditation on this like pedestal, and I love reading meditation books, but I hate meditating. I don't know. I love doing guided visualizations. I love doing, soul journeys and that kind of stuff, but I hate meditating. And so to finally see that the act of meditating, and you can just hear it in the way people instruct you to do it. They're like, don't listen to your thoughts. Just let your thoughts go by. AKA, don't believe or pay any attention to the DMN. And then they say, focus your attention on the breath. Focus your attention on a chant. So, and it's the activating the CEN by focusing on the breath. So all meditation does is shift you from the DMN to the CEN. And we can all do that in ways that speak to our souls. So, if you would rather be walking in nature, if you'd rather be doing guided meditations, like that all is just as good as sitting cross legged and saying, "Oh." And that was very empowering to me.
I agree, honestly, because I do find it difficult to meditate, but there's a different kind of activity that I do that feels like meditation. Like you said, hanging out in nature, in garden, taking walks, showering. So for my listeners, honestly, you don't have to meditate. You just find your own form of meditation.
Okay, Viv, let's take a moment on like how powerful it is to take a shower. I think the shower is one of like the most like it's one of the most beautiful spaces and it's one of the most beautiful experiences. I'm so with you on that. Like taking a
Yeah,
shower can be
right?
so cathartic. Yes,
Yes,
totally.
yes, I definitely agree. Yes. Are there simple tools or mindset shifts that listeners can start using today to create distance from those negative thought patterns?
You bet. So the first thing is that idea of getting in the present moment, but to make that very real, it is to focus on something outside of yourself, focus on something internal to you. Or if you want to stay in your brain, focus on analyzing the thoughts. So it's whatever works well for you, but to choose to put your focus somewhere will stop the DMN. And you've gotten there when you actually get to silence. The chatter needs to go away, and then you've fully activated it. Because a lot of us are spending so much time in our DMNs that it can feel almost impossible to get out of them. And that chatter will keep going. And so you have to keep going until you get to that place of just stillness, and then you've gotten there.
Thank you for that, honestly. So, your approach has helped with everything from imposter syndrome to social anxiety. Could you walk us through how it works in real life situations?
Oh, totally. So, one situation that came up with someone is being very anxious about going into work like cocktail parties. You know, there's always the like socializing networking event before the big event. And we're all told that we're supposed to attend those because it's so good to network with everyone. But this person had a lot of anxiety about going into a room of people they didn't know and making conversations and trying to make connections. And so when we talked through, it was because there was a lot of negative self talk of they're going to judge me, they're smarter than I am, they're more successful than I am. What am I going to say that's funny? I'm not funny enough. I'm not interesting enough. Like, how am I going to keep their attention? And so it was to say, okay, your DMN is flaring because it wants to be in a clan of 150 people it's known since birth. Now we're putting it in a room with 250 people that it's never seen before. So your DMN is waving a red flag and going like code red. I'm like totally freaking out and I have no idea how to keep us safe right now. And one thing that she found very helpful was to say, but you know what? So I'm dealing with my DMN flipping out on its own, but so is everyone else in the room. And theirs is all flipping about whatever their DMN is telling them is important based on their family conditioning, social conditioning, and everything. So it's that kind of that we all are stuck with this thing. We all are socially anxious. I don't think I know anyone who isn't socially anxious. Like, I have one dear friend who has 1,000 friends and she's constantly social, and she talks about being socially anxious. So, this is the human condition, and we can start to let it go when we realize everyone is feeling this way because we're all hearing the same safety messages from this primitive brain that is freaking out about what modern society is asking it to do.
I totally agree. And that's a really good example. Thank you for sharing that because it triggered a memory of mine that made me want to ask you whether or not this was me moving from DMN to CEN, right? Okay. I was supposed to go for a weekend trip and I've never slept outside of my house in Nigeria just because of background. And I just felt, okay, you know what? I've grown up that way. I don't need to push out of it or go out of it of my comfort zone. So there was a trip that I was supposed to come up with a group of friends. And it was one of those trips that made me feel like you have to be there. You would hate to be hearing stories of how everybody related to each other, how everybody got closer. You've grown with this group. This is their first trip together. It's just a weekend away. You know, it's not too far, but it's different. So then I started to go into DMN mode where I was like fighting against the trip in my mind. I was like, that no, it's not going to work out. It's not going to be good. I'm not going to have fun. You know, it's not even worth going just to avoid the conflict or the confrontation of breaking out of that comfort zone of sleeping away from the house at home. And I was like, finally, after, you know, having a breakdown, because there was so much going on, so much more going on, this just compounded it. After speaking to a dear friend, I just sat down with myself and I said, what is going on is that you're scared. You're scared to assert yourself. You're scared to break out of that comfort zone that you've created where you don't really fuss against something like going away for the weekend in Nigeria. You know what I'm saying? And I just said to myself that I'm not going to fight you on this. I'm just going to go with the flow. But I'm going to ensure that I do everything that makes me stay away for the weekend. I don't know how that's going to be. I'm not going to kick and scream and, you know, rebel loudly. I'm just going to go and allow things to flow. So I didn't know, normally, like I know how my monkey mind can be like, oh, what's going to happen? Oh my God, we need to do this. I was like, I don't have time for that. I'm just here to have fun. So luckily, due to events that happened, there was a huge storm in the city while we're away at the beach. And because of that huge storm, you know, there was nowhere I could go back, right? And that's how I ended up spending the night there, you know? And, you know, what I loved, which was the key thing for me, was that, you know, I have parents that are very protective. And it's not in a way where you're like, oh my gosh, my parents don't let me do anything. Due to maturity, you start to see why a parent would be a certain way, especially when you live in a place like Lagos, Nigeria. So they can be protective and they can, you know, what's the right word? When they are in their own DMN, they start to like rant and explode, or at least back in the day, back in the day. So my old mind was like getting ready for that. Now, what did I do? When I finally had signal, when we left the beach and everything, I had an awesome, beautiful time. It was worth it. I looked at my phone and my mother was like, it's okay if you're sleeping over, just be safe. I was like, what? And in that moment, I was like, no way. Imagine if I had given into that mind. I wanted to be like, there's just going to be an issue. We're going to have an issue. There's going to be something wrong. I didn't let that happen. I was like, no way. We're going to be cool. We're going to let everything flow. Just for me to get home and ready to like, get home to like conflict or something. And I just see her say, it's okay, be safe. If you're staying there, it's cool. I'm like, that has never, ever happened before. And so when I got home, another thing that usually happens when I'm in my DMN is that I wouldn't take into consideration other people's feelings. So when I got home, because I was, out of signal because it was a storm, so there wasn't signal at the beach, I went to my mom and I said, I'm so sorry that I was out of coverage. It was the storm. It was not on purpose because back in the day, I would just not look at my phone or acknowledge any of her messages. So she thought I was doing the same thing that I did in the past. So I was doing something different this time by coming to her and being like, I'm very sorry that this happened. I was out of coverage. It was not intentional. Thank you for being cool about me sipping over this, that, and that. And for the first time, she was like, okay, yeah, it's cool. And I
Yes.
said to myself that wow, I've never apologized before. And for the first time, I'm taking into consideration your feelings as well, while still honoring myself, and everything is cool, everything is fine. I couldn't believe it. But for the first time, I can say that that was me jumping out of those thoughts and not allowing me to be my DMN.
That is so beautiful, and I see so many
Thank you.
interesting examples of how you, like, fought against your DMN. So the first one was, it's that the DMN would be terribly scared of sleeping away from your house for the first time ever. It would be like, "Are you kidding? Like, we are literally leaving our cave. We can't do that." And so fear, fear, fear. But then also fear of, "I'm gonna miss out with these friends." PS, who are another clan. So that's another
Yeah.
clan that you want to make sure you stay a part of, and you want to make sure you're doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting kind of fear on both sides. And what's beautiful is to go into your heart and then be like, but what do I really want to do in this? And when you authentically be like, no, I want this trip. I want to go on it and to go. And it ended up being wonderful. But I love your point about your parents potentially ranting when you come home, because there's so many times our parents rant to us, and I feel like I've ranted to my son when I'm scared. And I'm scared for his
Mm.
safety, and I'm scared for
Mm-hmm.
something that went on. Some of the more damaging things we can do as parents is when we're scared about how the world will react to our children based on what they say, who they are, like how they choose to
Yeah.
identify. And so if we then are like, oh, this is scary, you shouldn't do this, you can't do this, that's our DMN essentially telling our kids like it's an unsafe world to be authentically you. And that's not
Yeah.
great. And so there's so much of this work that is then unpacking what was the stuff that my parents' DMNs essentially told me, and like
Mm.
what can I release from that? So I had another person I worked with whose parents were obsessed with them becoming a doctor, had to become a doctor.
Mm.
And they ended up going into business and doing a fabulous job, but it was never being a doctor. Because somehow in their DMN, that was the clan that guy needed to be in. And he was so sad that he had felt like he had disappointed his parents and let them down. When if we all knew more about this neuroscience, we would be like, you're not letting anyone down. And your parents need to see that their whole idea of you have to be a doctor is false. Like, we need to
Yeah.
follow our hearts and where that takes us. And you did that. And that's very cool.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I was just thinking when you shared these stories with me, I was like, wow, that was me actually moving out of my DMN. And it's very principal in my life journey because I've always been ruled by my nervous system not being so calm back in the day. And I didn't know about how I was stuck in fight or flight for a while until finally I achieved some form of inner peace. So I could see my old mind running with old stories and old ways to get me worked up. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. Sorry. Like, just be there. So it's kind of like you tuck it in to the back of your head. You can still hear it. And I think a lot of times people, I'm sure you'd know, is that people, they feel like the thoughts need to disappear completely. No, a lot of times it's still running. It's just you choosing not to identify with it. It's just you choosing not to absorb the message. Back in the day when I was growing, I used to be like, gosh, I hate the fact that me, despite me not focusing on these thoughts, they're still running in my mind. How can I delete them completely? But through growth, I started to realize that I think a lot of times they would stay there. It's just for you to make the choice not to identify with them.
This is such a huge point, and it was something I had to learn in the process of writing the book because I thought
Mm,
I was going to be like, you know, practically levitating and like walking around the grocery store being all zen. And I had a really bad night's sleep and like something got a little off and I was in a stress state and I couldn't stop it. And I was like, wait, I can't stop this thing. So you're absolutely right that with our nervous system, when we go into either fight or flight, and what's lower than that is the freeze response, the brain, your whole body goes into survival mode. And so it stops your, you know, gastrointestinal system, it stops other stuff. It also stops our CEN, which is the thoughts we choose to have. So we can't control our thoughts when we're in a stress state. And this is
yeah,
one of the
wow.
ways we know that the DMN is so baked deep into us and is so like primitive in its way because it's so intricately linked with the amygdala and with our stress system. So we want our DMN still going when we're stressed because we're looking for threats and we're automatic and we're seeing what's out there. But it sucks to live through in the modern day. And in those situations, yeah, the method I use, it's called ignoring. And it's essentially like we habituate to sirens going by and to noises, and we need to habituate to the DMN. And that is exactly what you were doing, which is so cool. You were doing it before, you knew the background of it, which is they will be
Yeah.
running and they're there. But if
Uh-huh.
we can ignore them and be like, oh, there it is, but I know I'm stressed, so I'm never gonna be able to turn them off. So at least I'm just going to ignore them and not attach to them.
Yes.
We're gonna recover a lot quicker from that stressful situation than we would otherwise.
Yeah, I totally agree because just before we move on to the next question, I realized that when you're in a state of stress, you can't really think logically. You can't think strategically. It fogs everything up. So you end up like taking actions that are very, I would like to say low vibrational because I cannot find any other word right now, but it's just lower than what you would take if you are operating on your aligned level, on your default frequency. That's what I believe. So it's really important for us not to really, really worship our thoughts or, think that they're the end all be all because it's not.
It's
So
not, and
next
it's
question.
reactionary. We're reactionary is a good word for it
Yeah.
when we're stressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reactionary, yeah, is a very good word actually. So much to say about that, but we don't even have enough time anymore. So you said your motivation was wanting to be a better mom. How has this new way of relating to thoughts transformed your parenting? And how can parents support their children when they're being hard on themselves?
Yes. So for me, what I noticed is I got way more present with my son. Typically, and this was back when he was literally littler, we'd be playing dinosaurs and I'd be like half playing dinosaurs and I'd be half wondering what I was cooking for dinner, when I was starting it, do I need to preheat the oven, blah, 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 blah. And when I realized this, it was like, no, choose to focus right on this playing. And I saw him kind of light up. He kind of calmed down, like, he could tell I was right there, and it really chilled us both out, and so that was a lovely benefit to having learned about this, and then, gosh, when we hear our kids do it, it's like the most heartbreaking thing in the world because, they'll say things that it sounds like they're insecure when we love them more than anything, and that's like and it's heartbreaking, but if we can teach our kids that this is what this is. So the insecurity and everything, the DMN finishes developing in like middle at like childhood and adolescence. It's fully mature. But our CENs don't fully mature until we're in our late teens. So we have a window of time, especially with teenagers, where their DMNs are wired and like ready to go. And their CENs can't shut them down as well. And so this is the whole high school cliques, how important it is to be accepted, how much we just want to be normal and not different when we're in high school. We just want to be part of the group. This is the DMN running our lives. And so, a kind of passion project, I would love to do another book for teenagers to educate them that this is what's going on in your brain. Because so to say, because it's got to be so shocking to them to go from being a kid and being like, I'm amazing. I want to be a firefighter or an astronaut. And like, and being so self confident and like out in the world, and then starting to feel that insecurity. And you hear it with kids. They say, well, something changed. And I started to get really insecure. And I started to not like my body, or I started to like, feel I couldn't do music, even though I love music. And to tell them, to educate them, this is a thought network that's coming online and it sucks. And we all are stuck with it, but you don't have to pay attention to it. Could do wonders for teenage mental health worldwide. So I would love to go in that direction in time.
And I think that would be impactful you doing that because I do remember being a teenager. And if I had more books like that, it would have impacted the way I evolved as a person. But everybody has their own like time to wake up and like rewire things. But imagine the impact you could make on teenagers at that time when they read the books. That would be amazing. Okay,
Yes.
so many of my listeners are on spiritual journeys. How do you see this neuroscience based work connecting with deeper spiritual truths or experiences of the self?
I love this question because we are all on spiritual journeys, and my spiritual journey is very, very central to who I am. And I feel like our negative self talk is one of the most, like, the largest things that gets in the way of us having a spiritual journey. Like, so many of us, myself included, we want to increase our spiritual abilities. We want to be able to feel more intuitive. We want to be able to, speak to spirit and feel that we're getting messages from spirit. But it's always our minds that get in the way. And so what my hope is that by understanding this neuroscience and understanding that this monkey mind is not me, that it's this, dopey caveman that I need to put to the side, it can help all of us connect more easily to our intuition, to spirit, to messages that are for us, and that we can also connect more to our hearts and to what we really truly want to be doing and what our journeys, like what we planned out for our journey in this lifetime, and that we can get more closely aligned with spiritually where we want to be going if we get rid of these negative thoughts.
So true, so powerful, and such a lovely answer. Thank you. Now, if our thoughts don't define us, then who are we really? Who is that other person we're reconnecting with underneath all the noise?
You know, this is a venue that I feel like we can talk about it a little more openly. So we are our souls, and our souls are 100% not our negative self-talk. They're not our fears. Like, when I think of what our soul is, it is the love that we have, the love that we give. It is like an expression of love. Feels to me what is most authentically who we are, and it is so not our negative self-talk. What's interesting is that we have a heart brain. We have neurons in the heart that is its own brain. It like operates completely independently. And if you think about it, it makes sense because you couldn't do a heart transplant if it didn't know how to pump on its own. So it's got its brain. And so we all know our stomach has a brain too. Well, our heart brain is connected to our CEN, and our stomach brain is connected to our DMN. So this is why we get IBS, where we get gastro symptoms when we're feeling stressed and upset. Like, our gut system is a stress system. So, but our heart connects to what we choose. And so who are we? We are what we feel in our hearts and what we choose to put our attention to. And the more we can be from a heart-filled space, hopefully the more in alignment we are with our soul and what our soul's journey is as well.
Thank you for that answer, honestly, because yes, we are souls and we are, I like to say we're infinite. We're not limited by those beliefs that we have of ourselves, which is why it's so important to be able to observe our thoughts as opposed to consume them. Yes. Wow. This is so interesting. Last question. What would you say to someone who's just beginning to question the voice in their head, but doesn't yet trust what lies beneath it?
Ooh, I would say, first of all, I'm so excited for you because this is such a profound shift when just questioning the voice and not identifying with the voice, putting that voice separate from yourself is like 90% of the journey. So, like, congratulations, you got this. Like, keep going. And the more they do it, probably the more they'll feel like, oh, yeah, you know what I think also helps, which is so interesting? You know how we all get happier as we get older? Everyone supposedly gets happier. We stop caring what people think. Well, I think it's because we've all lived long enough with this DMN and it has been obsessed with things throughout every single stage in our life that none of it mattered, you know? Like you look back at what your DMN cared about 20 years ago and you're like, that was ridiculous. Like, I don't know why I was so stressed about that." And so we get enough experience that we're like, "Oh, we don't even care what people think anymore." Or, we'll be fine if something happens. So it's to say, like, you've got this and just build more experience and it'll be authenticity and, happiness from there. It's great.
Oh, thank you so much because these are the best words to end this episode on. Thank you for being so positive, uplifting, and for breaking down the neuroscience of our thoughts. This was a very interesting conversation, and I cannot wait to dive deeper because there's so much more to learn from you. So, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence this episode. Oh, yes, let's talk about how Betsy has a book coming out June 1st. It's called Unkind Mind.
Yes, here it is.
Yes.
You can start to pre-order it now. So if you want to pick
Woo.
it up, it's an audiobook and electronic Kindle, however you want to do it. So if you're interested in this stuff, there's a lot more in there.
Yes, we'll definitely be checking your book out. Thank you for joining us once more, and we wish you a lovely day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Are we doing a tarot card reading?